Hi, everyone, and welcome to Inside High Tech by Sarona Partners. My name is Tuchani. I'm a managing partner at Sarona, and I'll be hosting our video cast today. Thank you for coming back to us, and I'm very honored to welcome here today Elisabeth Diana, which is the head of communications at Deel, one of the fastest growing companies in the planet today. And previously a VP of communications at not other than Facebook,
Yes.
as we all know today as Meta. Thank you, Elisabeth, for joining us. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. What a privilege.
Absolutely. What do you mean? I'm fascinated by what's going to come in this discussion. Where are you based this afternoon
I'm
morning?
right outside of San Francisco on this rainy Monday morning.
Oh wow, wow! And you've just been in Israel recently, no?
I was there about 2 weeks ago. It was so lovely. It was my first time going. We had a leadership offsite there, which was wonderful. So it was remote work's great, but you also need to meet in person once in a while. And it was really nice.
Absolutely, definitely in communications.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the one thing you loved the most about Israel?
Oh, that's easy. The food. The food is so good. I wish I could have stayed there longer and just eaten more food. It's so good.
What about the startup vibe? Did you have a sense
Yeah,
to get some of it?
a little bit. I'm gonna go back again, hopefully soon, and hopefully get more of that. But yeah, there's just so much innovation and so much, creativity coming out of the region. It's amazing. Yeah, it's great. Ugh,
I'm bought.
be back.
I'm absolutely bought. This is what I love the most about Israel: the energy, the vibe,
Yes,
the startup
totally.
spirit.
Yep, it's
Definitely
amazing. You need to bottle it up and bring it to other places.
working on it.
Exactly. That's what
So
you're doing
you're
right now.
yes, definitely, exactly. So you're new at Deal,
Yes.
right? You just joined.
Yes. About 4 months ago.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really good. So what do you like? You joined in, I guess, to elevate the communications of the company, which is already, to be honest, is a great communication company. Like I
Yeah.
see there that the Twitter, I see all of the social media activity and the way Alex, the CEO, is communicating. I think it was already a pretty,
Yeah.
spotless communicating company.
I agree.
And then you joined in. What do you see, like in your fresh eyes? You just joined this company
Yeah.
4 months ago, and the company is already doing quite well on the terms of communications. So, what are the things that you see joining in with your fresh eyes that could be changed, or that you think you should be working on entering into your role?
Yeah, that's a great question. I agree with you. I think good communication starts from the top, and Alex is very adept at that, and others, our COO, our co-founder Shwo, everyone is really good, especially on social. Um, I think, first of all, just I think we need to take a step back and make sure we're consistently communicating what Deal does to the world, and not just to its customers, its businesses that use Deal, but also to consumers, which is a little counterintuitive given it's more of a B2B brand. But what Deal does essentially is it helps anyone in the world find a job anywhere. Um, and it really allows people, if we do this right, millions of people to work for the best companies in the world, regardless of where they live. We believe talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And we're out to change that. And that is really a consumer facing, like an, as we call end user message, like the employees and the contractors that use Deal. We want to speak more directly to them. So that's something that we're trying to do more of. Um, how Deal does this, there's three ways Deal works, and we're honing that and making sure we consistently communicate that, whether you're in sales, whether you're in customer service, whether you're in communications, whether you're in end or product. And so the three things that Deal does is it helps onboard people. So once you hire someone internationally, we make it really easy to onboard someone compliantly anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter where you are. Second thing we do is we pay you in over 120 currencies, including crypto. And then the third is wherever you are in the world and whatever company you work for, we want to make sure you have the best experience, so that remote workers don't feel like second class citizens anymore. There's no idea of like a satellite office, right? You should feel like a respected team member wherever you are. And so we're working on ways to improve your experience when you work at that company, whether it's through healthcare integrations, perks, et cetera. So those are the three things we're saying, and we're trying to be more consistent in the way we talk about that. I think the final thing I'd say that we need to do more of, in addition to speaking more to consumers, getting kind of our who we are down, is really using data and the customers that we serve to tell the story on our behalf. So we put out a state of global hiring report recently, that showed just trends in our data that we're seeing, where people are moving to get a job, what are the hottest jobs in tech right now, and where are they? How have salaries increased as a result of remote work, right? And then also just customers. We want to make sure that customers can speak on our behalf and tell the story of Deel and how it's helped them. And not just the businesses that we've helped grow and expand to other regions, but also people who have been able to stay close to their friends and family because now they can work for this company that's millions, thousands of miles away, but they can stay in region, and work remotely because of Deel. So those are three things that we're trying to do. Sorry, that was a long answer, but I have lots of thoughts on what we can do better.
This is why we're having you here today. Yeah, I think you're touching a very interesting point that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is something in communications that it goes best when it's authentic. And how can you be more authentic than actually telling the stories of your own customers, like actual
Exactly.
people that are benefiting from what you're doing? How did you come up with it, and what's behind like sharing the data in your report, and how do you think, what's your take on making communications more authentic, and how to use and leverage stories of your end customers and so on to actually make you communicate in an authentic manner as a brand, as a company?
Yeah, I think with the data piece, it's just we now have over 100,000 contracts between workers and companies. So that's statistically significant enough to tell us a real story of trends that we're seeing. So that was something that I think, reporters in particular, if you show that the data, there's fidelity in the data and that we're seeing real trends that are statistically significant, I think they respond really well to that. I think there's also a missing piece of the remote work story. Like we hear a lot of sort of the domestic story, especially in the States, of people moving to different states in the US or different regions in a country, but we're not telling a bigger story of where people are moving around the world. And we actually have that data that not many other companies have. And so we saw that as an opportunity to tell that story. We're going to release the next one in July or August, to tell a bigger story and the trends that we're seeing over a year now.
Stay tuned, as we
Stay tuned,
say.
right? I'm support. I think on the customer side, I totally agree. It's like authenticity, and no one can tell someone's story better than themselves. You want to hear it from their mouths. We have an amazing story of, for example, in December, there was a typhoon that hit the Philippines, and a company that was hiring a bunch of people in the Philippines, was able to pay their team members early because of Deel. We have a feature where you can pay people early on our card, with our cash advance card. And that was really powerful to be able to pay people early, so that they could get supplies to fix their roofs or get water, right?
Amazing.
And just being able for them to tell that story is so much more powerful than me sitting here telling you that, right? Because it happened to them. So the challenge for us as communicators is, how do we source those stories? How do we find them? And then how do we tell them the most effective way? We have an amazing creative and marketing team that is working on telling those stories, in a really authentic and powerful way.
That's really amazing, and I bet that now for sure with the story in Ukraine and then Russia and so on,
Yeah.
I bet you have like thousands of stories of
Yeah.
individual people that are using Deel and companies that are using people there. And
Yeah.
would you care to share one?
I don't have anything specific to share right now. I just know that we're just working really hard to relocate people who need to be relocated. That's like number one priority from day one. So we're working on a few things. that, they're still sort of early, but we are in the process of relocating people, which is great. But yeah, right now we're just focused on like the actual solutions rather than telling the story of those people.
Yeah.
Hopefully can at some point,
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
Fix it first, speak
exactly.
about it later. Yeah.
Right. Heads down on getting people to the right
Yeah,
places.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And so, given that we're speaking about, how easy it is to be authentic and communicate your brand by telling your customers stories, what would you recommend a startup company in their infancy, like in their early stages and early days, where they don't yet have a customer base they can actually rely on and
Mhm.
communicate their experiences, but rather they're just starting their journey and they need to communicate what they do and who they are in order to gain and to acquire customers and to gain funding from investors and so on. What's your take on that? I mean,
Yeah, I think you don't need customers to start communicating by any means. I think start out with who are you as a brand? Like, what are you trying to do? And I think getting that narrative, we call it a narrative in communications, but getting that story of whether it's the founder story, how you came to be, or whether it's just what you're doing now, really being able to just write that out and make sure that it feels authentic, as you mentioned, to who you are and where you're going. Make sure it's clearly communicated in very human terms. So, no jargon. Um, Really, speak to someone like the end user, like the consumer would hear it. So that you could go to anyone and say, here's what, Deal does, and they'll understand it. And then make sure that you give that and you disseminate that narrative to everyone in the company so that everyone's telling the same story, right? And test it out. The other thing to do is once you've given it to a bunch of people, you can start refining over time and figuring out, okay, what do we need to tell a better story? Do we need some data? When we have the data, can we support our messaging with that data? And then finally, when you do have customers, you can sort of insert the customer stories within the narrative, but really it just starts with a good story and making sure it's consistent and that you test and sort of refine over time. I mean, even in my day to day with my friends, I switched jobs and I said, here's what Deal does. Tell me what you think. Does that make sense?
mm,
I've been able to refine the messaging over time. Obviously, that's a focus group of few, but I think it really does make a difference if you can test and see what really resonates.
yeah. And what do you think on the fact of often in communications you have what you are, I mean, the reality, and you have what you say,
Yeah.
which is the communications and like the marketing.
Yeah.
And I see in looking at startup companies and how they communicate and how they work,
Mhm.
I see two common mistakes. One is that the startup speaks about what they do and not why or to
Yeah.
whom or
The
what are they
why. The
solving.
so
Yeah,
what. Yeah.
or the why
Yep.
exactly. And they speak more about the features and they feel like they need to be transparent and to say everything about
Right.
the
Right.
product and the technology and
Right.
disclaimers and like that. If they don't, then they deceive their customer base.
Yeah.
And that's one very big mistake that I often see.
That's
And
true.
another mistake is exactly the opposite, is not being enough in details so that they're too vague and too, as you said, too much buzzwords and not
Yeah.
enough on the utilization of the product by the customer. So what's your opinion in terms of how much truth do you need to say and versus deception or not saying the full truth, because in communications you put the package outside and then the customer needs to go in and find the product within.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you
Well,
think?
the first rule of good PR is never deceive anyone, right? Like I think everything comes out in the wash eventually. So if you say something that's sort of untrue up front, like you should just assume that at some point it's going to come out. So I really would caution against, heavy spin and heavy, trying to cover up something that's just never going to fly. So that's the first rule and cardinal rule. I would say, you do want to put your best foot forward though, right? So it does matter, what you lead with. If you in a blog post want to talk about this one feature over another, lead with the one feature, right? I think like that's kind of PR 101, and it does make a difference. That being said, you don't want to hide or bury the lead, as we say, by putting the thing that is going to be the most attention grabbing down below, because then you lose credibility, right? If the big thing is that you are building an API and you don't announce that until like 3 paragraphs down, it's just like, what? Then people are either going to lose interest or they're just going to think that you're burying it for some weird reason. So that's definitely something I caution against as well, is just making sure you're really putting your best foot forward, and not burying something that's important down below. The third thing I would say is, yes, I think, you want to be succinct and you want to be human, as I mentioned before. So you really want to look at, okay, how can we communicate this in a way that makes sense so that there's not jargon? There's so many times when someone releases something and I go to the website or I go to the social media post and I have no idea what that means, like I couldn't repeat it. And you want to make sure that whatever you put out there, it should be intended to be repeated. And if you can't get other people to repeat it in a way that makes sense, no one else will. Or there will be confusion as to what you do.
Yeah, so I think this is a good tip for those startup companies that feel like if they don't say out loud, we do a product to solve your organization management and efficiency, and then they put all their disclaimers there because they feel like if they don't put their disclaimers there, then they're not clear or they're not true. So I think what you just mentioned about asking yourself what's the most important thing in your product, and focusing on that is a really good tip for those companies that want to understand how to depart from speaking about everything and not feel bad that they are being untruthful or deceiving, because the fact that you don't put out all of your disclaimers out there doesn't mean that you deceive anyone. It just means that you focus on what's really important.
You focus on what's important and then put it in the Q&A. And then if someone asks, you have a good answer for it, right? Like that's not deception. That's just, okay, I'm going to leave it to when there's Q&A and focus on the stuff that's really important. But if it's something that people will ask time and time again, like it's just something, a very obvious question, odds are you should put that in the press release or on the website, right? It saves you the time of going back and answering a bunch of questions, but also it just feels like the natural, like you've anticipated the next question, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm. So I want to touch now the controversial topic that we've had here in the background. So you came from Facebook to Deel. So many questions that I have for you for that.
Open book, go for it.
First question: so you were the VP of Communications, right?
Yes.
At Facebook. Yes. Now, Facebook, it's not a secret that it's a company that was out there in the media in a very controversial manner, and you were basically the forefront of this, Operation Communications.
Yep.
How was it like?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there were a bunch of people on the front lines, and they still are. It was, I think PR people like controversy. They like when things are tricky. So I think, I'm not saying that we wanted to invite controversy, but I think, that's the profile of someone who works at a company that's big and is nuanced and has, a lot of policy efforts in many different countries. And so invariably there's going to be conflict. There's going to be controversy. Our job was to get the facts right to the right audiences, and tell our story as best as we could. A lot of times, there are two types of problems. I think like there's a PR problem where you communicate something poorly and it goes wrong. Right. And we try to avoid that as communication professionals as much as possible. There's another type of problem that's just something happened to the company. There was a privacy issue, right? That's less of a PR problem per se, although it becomes one, and more of, an issue within the company that now you have to do press around and mitigate. And, I think the focus should be on just trying to get the right facts to the right reporters, and, never spin. I hate the word spin, but just really try to get people to understand what happened and what we're doing about it. I think as PR professionals, and definitely at Facebook, I face this too. A lot of times you are faced with an imperfect amount of information, right? You don't have all the facts. And your first instinct is to gather all the facts and then go out there. I think what we learned, especially in our profession at Facebook, is you have to really figure out decisively, okay, I have this amount of information. What can I communicate back to the press so that they understand that, like, I'm in this with them. I'm learning all the facts. I'm still gathering facts, but I want you to know what I know. That actually, lends credibility, but also it doesn't make it feel like you're just being silent on an issue, which I think then people assume that something is even worse.
Mm.
And we learn that over and over again. But I think that's something that I will definitely take to Deel. But yeah, I mean, I loved my time at Facebook, now Meta. I worked with some really, really smart people on some really hard issues that were facing the internet that had never been faced before. And, as
Could
I
you
said before,
share?
you learn and iterate, right? You learn and you iterate and you evolve.
I was thinking maybe it would be interesting. The reason why I do this conversation is because it's fascinating for me. Like, I'm
Yeah.
learning all the
Yeah.
time.
Oh, I
So
know.
I was wondering if you would if if you would share an actual story of some challenge in communications that you've had during your work at Facebook with all the media and the press um, battle that you've had there, and something very concrete that took place, and
Mhm.
how did you actually handle it? What did you do to
Yeah.
mitigate the press damage that was happening to the company?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that, we had an issue at Instagram when I was, heading up communications there, where, um, there was, the finals of the UEFA, football. I think it was like 2 years ago, I wanna say, in the spring. And a lot of footballers were receiving awful hate and racist abuse in their DMs and in their Instagram DMs. And obviously we do a lot of things. We put a lot of safeguards in place to make sure that this doesn't happen, but invariably, like, people are awful people and they say awful things, and there were things that were put in people's DMs, and a lot of footballers were really upset. I mean, do not blame them for being very upset, and spoke out against it. And so it became a PR issue, of course. I mean, I think what we did is we needed to act quickly to change the product. And that was something that I think is really, really a huge opportunity in my job, is to come together with such smart policy, product, and people to figure out, okay, this isn't just a PR issue, right? Like, this is actually a systemic issue where we need to maybe look at the product and decide if we need to put more safeguards in place. And so we did. We did that. We did more education with stakeholders like footballers and the Footballer Association, just how to use the tools that we have already. And then we marketed. We worked with marketing to really get the word out in a mass communication type of way, using actually Instagram to tell people how to use these tools. But it really took an all hands on deck effort to take a hard look at the product, take a hard look at the communications, take a hard look at the marketing, and really change course.
Wow, that's crazy. And how long did this entire process took from identification to fixing?
I mean, it was sort of, like, at first it felt like, okay, well, maybe we could just educate and get more tools, people to understand how to use our tools. But then we understood that, like, that we needed to do more. So I would say it was probably over at least 3, 4 months. And I should say we're not stopping there. Like, we are still constantly looking at how we can improve the product.
And what do you think about the change from, that's an obvious question. What do you think about the change between Facebook and Meta?
Yeah.
Whereas, it came in a time where really Facebook was covered by controversial media, and it wasn't really clear where the company is going in terms of, vision and future. And then instead of going out and saying, hey, we would fix what was challenging, they just changed their name and came out with a new vision and a new strategy that maybe it was there all along. But then they came out at this timing, I think, was very special.
Yeah.
What do you think about the change altogether, and like what the
Yeah.
company holds for the future? If
Yeah. I mean, I think the common misperception is that like I say we now because I'm just like forever a Facebooker. I think that Facebook Meta now, there were two misperceptions. One is that, pivoting to a different name, they abandoned all the other work that they were doing. Like they are still very focused on fixing a lot of the misinformation, the abuse. Like as I mentioned with the footballer example, like there is work still being done on all of those things. So that's not something that like, completely abandoned something and just moved to something else. I think the second thing is, as you mentioned or you implied, is that this was something that was in the works for a while. I think, you know, good leaders, you know, look at, okay, what's not just 5 years out, but 20 years out. And I think this was a real reorientation of, okay, here's a new priority for the company. It's not
mm,
now, but it's something that we need to work on to pave the way for this new future.
mm,
Um, and I would actually say the third misperception is that the metaverse is just Facebook's to own, right? I mean, the metaverse is going to be, I think everyone is going to move into that world. I think that's going to be the new reality, right? And it's hard to grasp because it's so far off, but there are things that we can do now again to pave the foundation for that. Um, I think, I think they're going to be. It's a big company, and I think they're, with a lot of impact, good and you can say good and bad. I think that ultimately Meta wants to do what's right by people and thinks that this is the future, and so wants to build things and meet people where they will be going.
mm,
Um, and I applaud them for that. Obviously, I'm biased. Full disclaimer: I worked there for a very long time, but I think what they're doing is ambitious and really interesting. And of course, there's going to be many hot takes, as there always are. But I think if they stay focused and they keep on building great products, like they will continue to do what they say they want to do. And I think
yeah,
that's good for consumers.
yeah. To be honest, they deserve, the full credit. That the amount of interest and activity in the
Right.
metaverse since
Right.
they actually came
Right.
out and declared that that's their vision is like
Yeah.
insanely
Yeah. And
larger
everyone knows
than what
about
it
it. At
happened
least they
before.
know, right? They know what Meta is focused on now.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. That's amazing. So, what made you? I mean, you've been in Facebook for so long, and obviously, we can tell that you loved it. What made you make the shift and move from a solid company that you loved the work at to Deel, which is even though fast growing and amazing, um, is a smaller company than
yeah.
than Facebook, and is still fast growing. It's more dynamic. I would suppose less stable in a way.
Right.
What made you decide to do this shift?
I would say I really wanted something a little bit smaller, a lot smaller. I mean, I had seen Facebook grow up, which was amazing, but I was yearning for the days when like they were still sort of building, improving themselves, and it wasn't quite born out yet. The second thing that I really was looking for was something that was having a real impact on the future of uh, businesses. So when I worked at Facebook before Instagram, I worked a lot on our small business efforts, helping millions of small business grow around the world because of Facebook advertising and sort of leveling the playing field when it comes to how you can reach people with marketing and advertising. Because traditionally before Facebook advertising, before Google, it was really hard as a smaller company to reach a bunch of people and market your product. Like you needed a bunch of money to do that. You needed TV ads, and they were just out of reach. And so, what Facebook did and what Google did and others, they really leveled the playing field and said, with a few dollars a day, you can reach a ton of people if you just get more targeted in your advertising. I loved that because it just you met so many businesses around the world that were like, because of Facebook, because of online advertising, I was able to grow my business from on the corner to around the globe. And I just loved that and talking to the customers who grew their business. And I found that with Deel. I mean, Deel's doing that for for hiring, and finding talent and expanding into other regions. They're doing the exact same thing. It's leveling the playing field when it comes to, okay, I can finally compliantly do this thing in another country that was only reserved for a big business who could open up an entity and had the money and the time to do that. And now we're saying you don't need that. So it's sort of, there's a lot of analogies there. And when I was talking to Alex and Shwo and Dan and the whole leadership team, that clicked for me. And I think that's really powerful. And I think I think we have the capabilities to get there. We're not there yet. But we are definitely, you feel the momentum.
I love how you tell the story.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
really
exciting.
It has emotion.
Yeah.
It's very special.
Yeah,
Very,
it's
very
I mean,
special.
as you were talking about before, just talking to customers. I mean, when you talk to them and you just hear their stories, it's authentic. It's like you're really helping people, and that's exciting.
So I want I want you to tell us the future. So you
Future.
so you entered Deel now, and you've been in the company for like 4 months. And I bet that you spend a lot of these 4 months, researching and trying to understand where the company stands and what needs to be done moving forward.
Yes.
So what needs to be done moving forward?
Do you mean from a communication standpoint or just like the company in general?
From whatever you would like to take it to.
Gosh, there's so many ways I could go with this. I think we probably need to get even better from a communication standpoint. We need to get even better at telling our story, kind of what I was mentioning in the beginning. So really honing who we are, getting that messaging and that data and those customer stories into the hands of more and more people at Deel so they can go out and tell that story. I think we need to increase awareness of Deel. I think I envision a world in which I sit down at a dinner party and people actually know what Deel does. Everyone knows, right? That would be amazing. So in a good way, that they speak highly of the company and they're aware of it. So I think we need to do more to get the word out about Deel in the press and in social media. That's another thing. I think on the company side, we're very good at customer support and customer service. I think we're known for it, but I think we need to do even more to be able to, instead of just fixing people's problems when they come to us, maybe there's a way that we proactively can say, I see that you're doing this. I actually think you'd be doing this instead. So becoming more of like a consultant in some ways for some of these companies. And that you're like 2 or 3 steps ahead of them in terms of like where they should hire, how they should do it, right? What positions. So I think even becoming more of like a consultant versus just like a fix-it person. And then finally, I mean, the obvious one is just keep growing our customer base. I think we have an amazing array of great customers from Coinbase to Cloudflare to Reddit to others, big names, and then smaller businesses as well. But I think we need to continue to even move upstream even more and probably employ even more, or not employ, sorry, onboard and provide support for bigger customers, bigger enterprise customers, which we're working on.
And from the communication standpoint, so you entered into the company, you made your planification of what you would like to implement, what would be Elisabeth's color into your role and into the company.
Yeah.
What do you think we would see coming up from the communication standpoint?
I mean, we're definitely working on a few things with data, which is fun. Just like telling the story, like, again, we have so much data. So how do we cut the data and show, the interesting things that reporters care about right now that are timely and relevant? Definitely need to work on harnessing more of those customer stories as we talked about. So how do we work with marketing and creative to tell those stories? And then we just have a lot of, product. We're shipping a lot of stuff every day. Some are small incremental tweaks. Some are going to be bigger that we'll probably want to do PR around and partnerships. But yeah, there's definitely a lot going on. So stay tuned for more.
What the future holds.
There's a lot. The future is bright with Deel. So that's good.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
I
see the year at the back seat of the car.
Come along for the ride. It's gonna be fun.
Absolutely, I watch you guys ride, and it's just, yeah, impressive.
Oh,
Really,
thank you.
really.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. This was wonderful.
Absolutely. Any final words that you want to share with our audience, about communications, about Deel, about metaverse, about life, about
I think I really liked your point on authenticity. I think when it really comes down to that, that really, be true to who you are. The rest will follow in some ways. I mean, it's not as simple as that. Obviously, I'm oversimplifying, but I think when you write down who you are as a company, it needs to feel like you.
mm,
It also needs to the authenticity. There's also, adjacency to being human, and speaking like a human. So really, I stress that anyone should be able to repeat what your company does. And if they can't do that, then you need to go back and look at how you talk about it. So yeah, those would be my tips, but that's very high level.
that's definitely a grab and go kind of
Yeah.
summary. Amazing, amazing. Elizabeth, thank you so much for
Oh my
taking the
gosh, thank you
time
too.
to speak with us today. It was an absolute pleasure. And I love you and thank you. It's
You guys.
been a great pleasure, and I hope you come back to Israel soon.
Oh, I will. I'll be back. I can eat more of the amazing food and just yeah, it was great to be there. But thank you so much for having me.
And sun, and sun. Next
And
time
fun and
you
fun.
come in the summer.
Exactly. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and thank you so
You
much.
too, and thank you. And I look forward to see what's going to happen in Dil soon.
Me too. Thank you. Bye, dude. Bye.